It was late at night when the first lights appeared in the sky, far away from any city where human eyes could catch them. The world below slept peacefully, unaware that something extraordinary was happening above the clouds. A massive ship, silent and dark, slipped into Earth's orbit. Its surface shimmered faintly, bending the starlight so it looked invisible to normal telescopes. No one on Earth could detect it. At least, that's what the visitors believed. Inside the ship, a group of alien envoys stood gathered in a chamber filled with glowing symbols and quiet hums of power. Their leader, tall and robed in silver fabric, studied the blue planet turning below. His voice carried both pride and caution as he spoke to his companions. They had traveled across many systems to reach this young world, not for war, not for conquest, but for something more curious. A test. The aliens belonged to a civilization so ancient that their history stretched back millions of years. They had seen hundreds of species rise and fall, some burning bright with promise, others collapsing into nothing. To them, Earth was just another small world with a developing race barely stepping into space. Humanity had rockets, satellites, and small stations in orbit, but no true mastery of the stars. The aliens considered them clever children at best. Still, curiosity drove them. Humanity had developed rapidly compared to most species. In just a few thousand years, they had gone from caves to computers. That speed was unusual, perhaps dangerous. The galaxy whispered rumors about the strange creatures called humans, who were stubborn, unpredictable, and relentless when faced with challenges. The aliens wanted to see if those rumors were true, so they carried with them an object. It looked like a smooth piece of metal, no larger than a suitcase, but inside it was something far beyond Earth's understanding. A fragment of warp technology. It wasn't complete, of course. The aliens had carefully stripped away crucial parts, leaving only hints of how it might work. Even the greatest minds of advanced worlds would need decades to rebuild it. That was the point. It was a puzzle, one meant to measure intelligence, patience, and creativity. The leader of the envoys turned to his companions and said, "We will leave it for them quietly, without explanation. If they stare at it and fail, we will know they are not ready. If they worship it, we will know they are simple. If they study it, well, then we will learn something new." The others agreed, confident that humanity would struggle. No young race had ever unraveled such advanced engineering in less than a century. It was safe, harmless, almost like leaving a locked treasure chest in front of a child. The ship descended quietly, hidden from radars and satellites. They chose a place remote and quiet, a dry desert far from human cities, where the night winds howled and the stars burned bright. The craft hovered silently above the sands, and from its belly, a beam of soft light lowered the strange metallic object to the ground. When it touched the earth, it sank slightly into the sand, waiting for human discovery. The aliens didn't linger. They had no desire to meet humans face to face. Not yet. They returned to orbit and prepared to watch from the shadows. Their instruments could track everything: heat, sound, even the movements of human technology. All they had to do was wait for some wandering explorer, some desert scientist, or even a curious villager to stumble upon their gift. As the night wore on, the aliens spoke quietly among themselves. One of them laughed softly, saying, "Perhaps they will think it is a meteorite, or perhaps they will fight over it like they always fight over scraps of power." Another added, "At best, they might build shrines around it, calling it a relic from the gods. That is what most young races do." But not everyone was so dismissive. The youngest among the envoys, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim chamber, frowned as he looked at Earth. "I've studied their history," he said. "They are not like others. They don't give up easily. When something puzzles them, they tear it apart until it makes sense. When something challenges them, they adapt. Even when they face destruction, they fight harder. Are you sure it is wise to test them this way?" The leader smiled, though his expression was cold. "That is exactly why we are here. Let us see if these humans are truly as restless and clever as the stories say. If they are, then we will have to decide whether they are a threat or an ally." Down on Earth, the desert lay silent under the moon. A small research outpost miles away caught a faint signal, something unusual like a magnetic pulse. A few scientists glanced at the monitors, confused, and marked it for investigation in the morning. They didn't know that what lay buried in the sand would soon change everything they thought they knew about the universe. High above, the alien ship drifted quietly, its crew patient and watchful. To them, this was just the beginning of a long game. They thought they had set a challenge that would keep humanity occupied for decades, perhaps centuries. They believed they had all the time in the world. What they did not realize, what they could not even imagine, was that the humans below were not going to wait centuries. They were not going to worship the object or stare at it in confusion. They were going to do what humans always did when faced with the unknown. They were going to take it apart. And they were going to do it faster than anyone in the galaxy had ever believed possible. Morning sunlight stretched across the desert, painting the sand in shades of gold and red. A group of scientists drove toward the place where the strange signal had been detected during the night. They expected to find a meteorite, maybe a piece of space rock, nothing more. But when they reached the spot, they stopped in silence. Half buried in the sand was a metallic object unlike anything they had ever seen. Its surface was smooth, polished, and reflected light in strange patterns. It didn't look broken or burned like a meteorite should. Instead, it looked alive, as though it had been placed there with purpose. The scientists stood around it, unsure of what to do at first. One of them bent down and brushed the sand away, revealing strange grooves that pulsed faintly with light. "This is no rock," he whispered. Another touched it gently and felt warmth, like the object was alive or powered from within. Their curiosity flared instantly. They knew they had found something important, something beyond Earth. News traveled fast. The object was moved to a research facility, where more experts gathered. Soon engineers, physicists, and even military officials stood around it, arguing over what it could be. Some said it was alien technology. Others insisted it must be a natural formation humans didn't understand yet. But when the first machines scanned it, the truth became harder to deny. Inside the object were patterns, circuits, and structures that no human mind had ever seen before. It was technology, but not human technology. Every scientist in the room felt their heart race. If this was real, then humanity was no longer alone. Arguments broke out quickly. Governments wanted to keep it secret, fearing panic or rival nations. But scientists wanted to study it openly, believing it was the greatest discovery in history. For days, heated discussions filled the halls. Yet behind all the politics and fear, something else was happening. Something more powerful than rules or secrecy. Curiosity had been awakened. A small group of engineers couldn't resist working on the object. They began late at night when the official researchers went home. They didn't care about orders. They wanted to understand how it worked. Carefully, they opened the outer layer, expecting to find wires or metals like human machines. Instead, they found something far stranger, crystal-like components that glowed faintly, channels that bent energy in ways Earth science could barely imagine. Word spread quietly. Soon, scientists from different fields gathered around. Mathematicians, computer experts, and even young students with sharp minds were drawn into the mystery. It was as if the object had ignited a fire inside humanity's collective brain. Everyone wanted to see it, touch it, and take it apart. In universities, professors whispered to their students about the strange discovery. Online, rumors began to spread despite the government's efforts to hide it. Some claimed it was an alien artifact, others thought it was a government experiment. But in labs and basements across the world, groups of people began building models, sketching diagrams, and sharing ideas. Humanity's greatest strength, its curiosity, was now fully unleashed. The aliens watching from orbit didn't expect this. They thought humans would stare at the object in confusion for decades. Instead, within days, humans were tearing it apart. They didn't hesitate, didn't treat it as untouchable. Where other species might have worshipped it, humanity treated it like a puzzle begging to be solved. One evening, in a brightly lit lab, a group of young engineers argued over the design of one small part. "It's not just a power source," one of them said. pointing at the glowing crystal. It's something more, like it bends space itself. Another shook his head. Impossible. Nothing can bend space. But a third laughed and replied, so did people once say about flying. This was humanity's nature, to argue, to test, to fail, and then to try again until something worked. Every discovery led to more questions. Why did the circuits not connect with wires? How could the object power itself endlessly without fuel? And what was the strange vibration it gave off when exposed to electricity? Slowly, humans began to see patterns. One breakthrough led to another. Equations scribbled on boards began to make sense. Computer models simulated things no one thought possible. The work was messy, chaotic, and often reckless. Labs overheated, circuits burned, and more than one machine exploded during testing. But failure didn't stop them. Every mistake taught them something new. Every burned-out component was a step closer to understanding. As the days passed, the object no longer seemed like alien magic. It began to look like something humans could understand, something they could even rebuild. Where the aliens expected reverence, humans gave it curiosity. Where the aliens expected hesitation, humans gave it boldness. The fire of discovery spread beyond scientists. Mechanics, hackers, inventors, and tinkerers from every corner of the world wanted a chance to study the leaked blueprints and diagrams. People who had never spoken to each other before began sharing theories online. It was no longer just a government secret, it was a human challenge, and once humans faced a challenge, they never let go. Above the Earth, the alien observers grew uneasy. Their test had only just begun, but already humans were pushing further than they had imagined. What was meant to be a slow puzzle had become a race of wild, unstoppable curiosity. The aliens had seen many young civilizations, but none that tore into the unknown with such hunger. The humans didn't know it yet, but they were already walking the path to something greater. The object was no longer just an alien gift, it was fuel for their imagination. And once human imagination was lit, it was unstoppable. In quiet labs and noisy garages, in secret bases and open classrooms, humans everywhere leaned closer to the mystery. They didn't ask whether they were ready. They didn't wonder if they should wait. They only asked one thing: how does it work? And that question was about to change everything. The object lay open on the long steel table, its glowing parts spread out like the organs of some strange machine. The scientists and engineers around it stared with tired eyes but burning excitement. They had worked through the night, drinking coffee, scribbling notes, running experiments, and arguing over details. None of them wanted to leave. It was as if the object had cast a spell on them, a spell of curiosity. At first, it had seemed impossible. The circuits didn't follow any design they knew, and the crystals inside responded to signals no human instrument could measure properly. But humans had a habit of refusing to accept impossible. They tested, poked, and pulled. They pushed the machine until small patterns began to reveal themselves. One engineer noticed that when a crystal was heated slightly, it bent light in strange ways. Another found that when electricity flowed through a metallic line, the entire structure vibrated at frequencies no human-made material could reach. A mathematician watching from the side began to sketch numbers, whispering about distortions in spacetime. Slowly, connections were made. They realized this wasn't just a power system or a strange engine. It was a piece of something much bigger. It was a part of a drive that could bend space itself. Words like warp, jump, and faster than light echoed in the room. At first, people laughed nervously at the idea. But as more evidence piled up, laughter turned into silence, then into determination. The aliens in orbit watched closely, confident that humans would stumble after making a little progress. No species had ever taken more than a few steps forward on their first attempt. But humans didn't move slowly. Once they smelled a solution, they chased it like wolves after prey. Within days, labs across the planet were buzzing with activity. Governments tried to hide the discovery, but leaks had already spread online. Independent groups of scientists, hobbyists, and even students began working on their own versions of the technology. Schematics were sketched on napkins, theories shared in secret forums, and simulations coded on laptops in crowded apartments. Humanity's obsession had become global. One night, in a dusty university basement, a group of young physics students ran a simulation on a borrowed supercomputer. They fed the alien equations into their program, mixed with human physics, and waited. The screen flickered, then produced results that made them stare in disbelief. The machine predicted that space itself could be folded, distances shrunk, and a ship could travel light years in moments. Their hearts pounded. They weren't looking at science fiction, they were looking at science. Meanwhile, in a secret government lab, engineers argued over a strange discovery. The alien circuits, when assembled in a certain way, created fields that bent gravity slightly. A pen rolled across the table, not because anyone touched it, but because the air around it had shifted. Gasps filled the room. The impossible was breaking. Of course, there were failures. Many failures. In some labs, machines short-circuited, sparks flying across the floor. In others, crystals shattered when pushed too far, filling the air with smoke and the bitter smell of burning wires. But every failure brought new information, and humans were experts at learning from failure. They weren't discouraged. They were driven harder. In one private garage, an inventor worked with tools meant for cars, not alien engines. His neighbors thought he was mad as loud bangs shook the walls and lights flickered late into the night. But one evening, his machine hummed with a strange energy, glowing faintly blue. He fell to his knees, laughing, knowing he had touched something far beyond the reach of normal science. The aliens watching grew restless. Reports filled their ship. Humans weren't just studying the object, they were rebuilding it. And faster than expected. One alien slammed his hand against the console. It took us centuries to perfect warp technology. How can they do this in days? Another shook his head, fear creeping into his voice. Because they are not like us. They don't follow rules. They break them. On Earth, the race continued. Groups worked independently, but somehow together they moved like a single mind. One discovery in Europe spread online, and hours later it was being tested in Asia. A breakthrough in America was improved by a small team in Africa. Humanity's strength wasn't just curiosity. It was collaboration. Chaos turned into progress. Soon, pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. The engine's design became clearer. The crystals weren't just power sources, they were anchors for bending space. The circuits weren't random, they created patterns that stabilized the fold. The impossible was no longer impossible. It was becoming inevitable. By the end of the week, the first crude prototype stood in a lab. It wasn't beautiful, not like the smooth alien device. It was clunky, patched together with human metals, wires, and computer chips taped into place. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and the machine threatened to explode more than once. But when they powered it on, something incredible happened. The air shimmered. A small distortion appeared, like a ripple in water, floating in the middle of the room. Scientists froze, staring at it with wide eyes. They reached out cautiously, and their hands felt a strange tug, as though reality itself was bending. For a moment, everyone forgot to breathe. They had done it. They had broken the impossible. Above, the alien ship trembled with unease. The leader stared at the screen showing Earth's progress, his voice low and filled with dread. They were not supposed to do this. Not this fast. The younger envoy, the one who had warned them, whispered back, "You thought you gave them a test, but what you gave them was a gift." And down on Earth, in labs, garages, and basements, humanity smiled with tired eyes and dirty hands. They didn't care what the aliens thought. They only knew one thing. They had seen the impossible, and they had pulled it apart until it was possible. And this was just the beginning. The prototype sat in the center of the lab, humming with a strange energy. It looked nothing like the sleek alien device that had been found in the desert. Instead, it was messy, a patchwork of human parts forced together with wires, bolts, and computer chips. To anyone else, it might have looked broken, unstable, even dangerous. But to the exhausted scientists and engineers who had worked without rest, it was the most beautiful machine they had ever seen. The air around it shimmered faintly, as if reality itself was struggling to hold steady. The distortion they had created earlier was no longer just a flicker. It was bigger now, more stable, like a small window rippling in space. For the humans watching, it was proof that they were on the right path. No one went home that night. They tested, adjusted, argued, and tested again. At times the machine roared like a storm, making lights flicker across the building. At other times, it went silent, leaving only the heavy breathing of tired scientists and the scratch of pens on paper. But every failure was a step forward. Every spark, every broken circuit, every shaking hand added to their understanding. By midnight, they had made a discovery that shocked even themselves. The alien design was advanced, yes, but it wasn't perfect. The more they worked, the more they realized they could improve it. Human creativity had begun to add shortcuts, adjustments, and optimizations. They weren't just copying anymore, they were rewriting. One young engineer leaned back from the console, her eyes red from lack of sleep, and whispered, "We're making it better." No one argued. They all felt it. Where the alien design had been smooth and flawless, it was also rigid, locked into one way of working. Humans didn't think that way. They broke rules, bent logic, and found messy solutions that still worked. And sometimes, those messy solutions worked even better. The aliens orbiting Earth didn't sleep either. Their ship remained hidden among the stars, watching the progress below with growing unease. The leader paced back and forth, his long fingers tapping nervously against his robes. He had seen many young species tinker with advanced technology, but never like this. They were moving too fast. Much too fast. Reports came in every hour. Humans weren't just building one prototype, they were building dozens. Labs across the planet, connected through leaks and secret networks, were racing each other. Students in cramped dorm rooms exchanged ideas with military engineers in hidden bunkers. Inventors with greasy hands in dusty garages sent notes to professors in polished universities. Humanity had become a swarm of minds working toward the same goal. By dawn, something extraordinary happened. A new prototype came to life, this one smaller and far more stable. Its distortion effect was no longer flickering and fragile. It pulsed steadily, a doorway of bent space opening and closing on command. Gasps filled the lab as objects were pushed through. A screwdriver, a pen, even a small robot. Each one vanished into the ripple and reappeared a few meters away, unharmed. The scientists stared at each other, their mouths open in awe. They weren't imagining it. They had just created controlled warp. The room erupted into cheers, laughter, and tears. Some hugged each other. Others collapsed into chairs with exhausted smiles. The impossible had not only been solved, it had been rebuilt, optimized, and made real in a single night. Outside the lab, word began to spread like wildfire. Rumors raced across secret channels and hidden forums. Warp drive exists. It works. They've tested it. No one knew for sure who had it or how complete it was, but the idea itself was enough. Around the world, more people threw themselves into the challenge. Humanity had entered a new era, and no one wanted to be left behind. The aliens above Earth were no longer calm observers. They were in shock. In less than a single human night, the test they had set for centuries had been shattered. Not only had the humans rebuilt their sacred technology, but they had improved it. The envoy who had warned them earlier now spoke again, his voice low. "I told you, they are not like the others. You cannot measure them by the same scale." The leader's face darkened. "Then they are dangerous," he muttered. But even he could not hide the spark of respect in his tone. Dangerous, yes, but also extraordinary. Back in the human labs, the experiments continued. Now the question was no longer, can it work? But, how far can it go? Some scientists pushed for bigger tests, larger distortions, and higher energy. Others urged caution, fearing accidents that could tear holes in reality itself. But humanity's hunger was unstoppable. They wanted to fly. They wanted to break the chains of distance and explore the stars. By the second night, plans were already forming for the first real test flight. A small ship, equipped with the rebuilt engine, sat waiting in a hangar. It wasn't ready, not truly. The The systems were rough, the safety untested, the design rushed. But the spirit of human discovery burned too brightly to wait. One of the scientists stood before the ship, running his hand along its metal hull. His eyes were tired but full of wonder. "We were never meant to stay on this planet forever," he whispered. "This is just the beginning." And as the ship powered on, its engines glowing with a strange blue light, everyone watching felt the same truth deep in their hearts. Humanity had taken apart the impossible and built it again, stronger and faster. Overnight, they had done what no alien empire believed they could. The breakthrough was complete, and the universe, though it did not yet know it, was about to tremble. High above Earth, hidden in the cold darkness of space, the alien ship floated silently. For days they had been watching, expecting humans to struggle, to fail, or at least to take years to make progress. But what they saw now filled them with unease. On their glowing screens, they watched distorted energy fields stabilizing in human labs. They saw small ships being fitted with rebuilt engines. They saw progress that should have taken centuries happening in mere nights. The leader of the envoys stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his face tight with worry. His people had once believed that they were the guardians of advanced technology, the keepers of secrets too dangerous for young civilizations. They thought humanity would be like the others, awed, confused, stumbling in the dark for decades. But instead, humans had charged forward like fire spreading across dry grass. "This is wrong," one of the envoys muttered, his voice sharp with fear. "They are not supposed to advance this quickly. They were meant to fail or at least hesitate. No species learns at this speed." Another envoy, older and more cautious, whispered, "We should destroy the device. We should erase all traces before it is too late." But the younger envoy, the one who had studied humans more deeply than the rest, shook his head. His eyes glowed faintly in the dim light as he spoke with quiet certainty. "It is already too late. Even if you erase the object, the knowledge is alive now. Once humans understand something, they do not forget. You cannot kill their curiosity. You cannot put out their fire." The leader turned, his voice low and heavy. "Then what are they? A miracle or a threat?" No one answered, but in their hearts each of them knew the truth. Humanity was both. Meanwhile on Earth, the aliens' unease grew worse with every report. Humanity wasn't just rebuilding their technology, they were improving it. New prototypes were appearing everywhere, each one faster, stronger, and more stable than the last. The aliens could hardly believe what they were seeing. It had taken their own people generations of careful study, trial, and error to master warp technology. Yet the humans had not only unlocked it overnight, but had begun rewriting the rules themselves. "They don't see limits," one envoy whispered, his voice trembling. "They don't accept walls. They break everything open until it bends to them. If they can do this with warp, what else will they do?" The leader pressed his fingers against the screen, watching a human test craft shimmer with blue energy. "If they spread this technology to the stars, no empire will be safe. They will challenge everyone, and they will win." Panic spread through the alien crew. They whispered about the dangers of letting humanity rise too quickly. Some argued that they should contact their own leaders, send warnings to the Galactic Councils, and prepare defenses. Others suggested immediate action, destroying Earth before humanity became unstoppable. The word extermination was spoken more than once in the chamber, and each time it left a chill in the air. But the younger envoy stood firm. His voice cut through the fear. "You do not understand. If you strike them, they will not break. They will fight. That is who they are. Every time they are cornered, they grow sharper. Every time they are wounded, they grow stronger. If you attack them, you will only forge them into something more dangerous." The room fell silent. The aliens exchanged uneasy glances. They had studied many civilizations, but none like this. Most species had patterns, they grew at a steady pace, following predictable steps of progress. But humans? They were chaos made flesh. Their minds leapt over barriers, their hands built with whatever scraps they had, and their hearts burned with endless defiance. To fight them was to invite disaster. Down on Earth, the first test ship stood ready. Its small hull rattled as the warp engine came to life. The distortion field shimmered around it like a veil, bending light in ways that made the air itself seem alive. A group of scientists and engineers gathered nearby, holding their breath. The countdown began. The aliens watched too, their eyes wide. If the humans succeeded, then the galaxy would never be the same again. The engines roared, and in a flash of blue light, the ship vanished. For a heartbeat, it was gone from every radar, every sensor, every eye. Panic swept the lab on Earth. Had it exploded? Had it been lost forever? Then, just as quickly, the ship reappeared, hovering in the same spot as if nothing had happened. Its pilot's voice crackled through the speakers, breathless with excitement. It worked. We folded space. We traveled and returned in an instant. Cheers erupted in the lab. People jumped, hugged, cried, and shouted with joy. The impossible had become real. Humanity had leapt into the future in a single night. On the alien ship, silence fell. The leader's face was pale, his voice a whisper. They are ready. Ready far too soon. One envoy clenched his fists. Then the galaxy must be warned. Humanity will spread like wildfire. They will not be stopped. Another asked quietly, almost fearfully, what if we try to contain them, guide them, trick them? The younger envoy shook his head again. No, they cannot be contained. They will see through every trick. And if you guide them, they will outpace you. The truth is simple. Humanity has reached the stars. The age of hiding them from the galaxy is over. For the first time in their long history, the aliens felt true fear, not of war, not of other empires, but of a single species that refused to accept limits. Humanity had broken the impossible, and in doing so, they had broken the balance of power across the stars. And far below, on the surface of Earth, men and women looked up at the sky with shining eyes, dreaming of what lay beyond. They didn't know the panic they had caused in orbit. They only knew that the stars were finally within reach, and nothing could stop them now. The small ship sat on the launch pad, its metal surface gleaming under the floodlights. It didn't look like much compared to the sleek alien vessels orbiting above. Its design was rough, patched together with whatever parts the engineers could find. But inside its hull was something the world had never seen before, a working warp engine. The people standing around it knew they were about to witness history. The pilot, a young test aviator with sharp eyes and steady hands, climbed into the cockpit. He wasn't nervous. If anything, he was smiling, as if he had been waiting for this moment his entire life. If this works, he said through the radio, you're going to have to build me a faster one. Laughter broke out among the scientists and engineers, but beneath the jokes was heavy tension. Everyone knew what was at stake. The countdown began. The air grew thick with anticipation. Lights flickered across the ship's console, and the warp engine began to hum, glowing faintly blue. The sound was unlike any rocket or jet, deep, steady, almost alive. It made the ground tremble, and the hairs on everyone's arms stand on end. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The ship shimmered, and then, in an instant, it was gone. The space it had occupied twisted for a heartbeat, leaving only ripples in the air. The control room filled with shouts and gasps. Some thought it had exploded. Others thought it had simply vanished forever. Every eye turned to the radar screens, waiting for a signal. Then, a burst of static filled the speakers, followed by the calm voice of the pilot. Control, this is Eagle 1. Do you read me? Cheers erupted and some people cried openly. The pilot continued, his voice shaking with excitement. I'm outside the solar system. The stars, they're different here. I can see things we've never mapped. It worked. It really worked. On Earth, the scientists clapped and hugged one another. The impossible had not only been rebuilt, it was flying. Humanity had stepped into the galaxy. But the flight wasn't over yet. The pilot pushed the engine further, his fingers gripping the controls. He wanted to see how far it could go. He aimed toward a nearby star, initiated the sequence, and once again the ship leapt forward. The universe bent around him, stars stretched into lines, and in less than a heartbeat he was light years away. For the first time in history, a human being had traveled farther than any rocket, any probe, or any dream had ever gone. He whispered to himself, unable to believe it. We can go anywhere. The alien ship orbiting Earth watched in silent horror. Their screens tracked the human test craft as it jumped across space, bending reality like their own advanced fleets did. Only this was worse. Humans had not spent centuries perfecting the method. They had learned it in days. The envoy leader slammed his fist against the console. They are children playing with fire. If they master this, they will ignite the stars. But others in the alien crew were not so sure. Watching the small, fragile human ship dance across the void filled them with something unexpected. Not only fear, but awe. No species they had ever studied had moved so recklessly, so boldly, without hesitation. Humanity was not crawling into the galaxy, they were leaping. Back inside the human ship, the pilot turned the craft around for the return trip. He activated the warp engine once more, and in a flash of light he reappeared in Earth's orbit, right above the planet. Gasps filled the control room as his voice came through again. Control, I'm back. You're not going to believe how far I went. When he landed, the people waiting outside the hangar cheered like never before. Cameras rolled, recording every second, even though the government still wanted secrecy. The news was too big to hide. Within hours, the world would know. Humanity had left Earth behind. Humanity had traveled the stars. The pilot stepped out of the ship, his face shining with triumph. He looked up at the night sky, where millions of stars burned like diamonds, and whispered, "We're coming." On the alien ship, the debate grew louder. Some envoys demanded immediate action. Destroy Earth before humanity spread beyond control. Others hesitated, pointing out that it might already be too late. The humans had proven not only that they could build the engine, but also that they could use it fearlessly. To destroy them now would only awaken their fury. The younger envoy spoke again, his voice steady. Do you see? They are not bound by fear. Where others would hesitate, they charge forward. They don't ask if they are ready, they simply go. That is why they are dangerous. But it is also why they are unstoppable. The leader's face was grim. Then the galaxy must prepare. The age of humanity has begun. Back on Earth, the first test flight was already becoming legend. Scientists scribbled notes, engineers made adjustments, and new ships were being prepared. The pilot's success had lit a fire that no power on Earth could extinguish. Nations that once fought over borders now argued instead about who would build the next warp ship. For the first time, humanity's eyes were not fixed on each other, but on the stars. The aliens in orbit understood what this meant. Humanity would not be contained. Not by fear, not by distance, not by limits. With every step they took, they grew faster, bolder, and more determined. Today it was one test flight. Tomorrow it would be fleets. And one day soon, the galaxy itself would tremble at the sound of human engines. The morning after the first warp flight, the world was no longer the same. The pilot's safe return had already spread like wildfire across secret government channels. And within hours, whispers had reached the public. People on the streets talked about it with shining eyes. News stations replayed the blurry footage of the ship vanishing and reappearing, and social media was flooded with one question. Had humanity just broken the limits of the stars? At the same time, the alien envoy in orbit was in turmoil. Their leader paced inside the command chamber, his hands clenched tight. They had come to Earth expecting to keep humans under control, to hide the warp technology from them forever. Instead, they had watched with their own eyes as a human test ship ripped through space with a rebuilt engine. The leader knew this was no small accident. The galaxy itself would hear of this soon. But the debate among the alien crew was fierce. Some argued that Earth must be destroyed now, before humans multiplied their new technology. Others believed it was already too late. Destroying Earth would only turn humanity into martyrs, remembered as the species that reached for the stars too soon. In the middle of their argument, a signal came from Earth. Humanity had noticed them. The aliens froze as the message played through their comms. It was the voice of the same test pilot who had flown the warp ship. His tone was calm, almost casual, but it carried a weight the aliens couldn't ignore. "We know you're watching. You thought we wouldn't see you, but we did. And now you've seen what we can do." The room fell silent. The pilot continued, "You tried to hide this technology. You thought we weren't ready. But you were wrong. We learned, we built, and we flew. In one night, we crossed the stars. So if you're here to judge us, know this, we are not afraid." The envoy leader's jaw tightened. Never before had a young species spoken to them like this. Most races they encountered either begged for mercy or collapsed in awe. But humans were different. They spoke as equals, with no hesitation, as if standing face to face with a predator and refusing to look away. The aliens responded with their own message. A hologram shimmered in the skies above a hidden military base where Earth's leaders and scientists had gathered. For the first time, humanity saw the envoy's true form. Tall, silver-skinned beings with eyes that glowed faintly like molten gold. Their presence was intimidating, but no one in the room flinched. "You should not have done this," the envoy leader's voice echoed. "Warp technology is not for children. It bends the fabric of the universe itself. Entire civilizations have been destroyed for less. You risk not only yourselves, but every world around you." The human representatives exchanged glances. Then one of the scientists stepped forward. She was older, her white hair tied back, her voice steady. "And yet we did it. You tried to hide it from us, but in only a short time we took it apart and made it our own. If you fear us, then it is because you know what we are capable of." The envoy's golden eyes narrowed. "You do not understand what awaits you among the stars. The galaxy is vast, and it is cruel. Countless empires will crush you before you can stand. You cannot imagine the wars that rage beyond your skies." But then the test pilot spoke again, his words cutting through the tension like a blade. "Maybe you're right. Maybe the galaxy is full of monsters. But you know what? We've faced monsters before. We've fought wars, we've survived disasters, and every time we've come out stronger. If the galaxy wants to test us, then let it come. We'll be ready." The envoy leader stared at him for a long moment. He could sense no fear in the human's voice, only determination. That was the most dangerous part. Humans did not measure risk the way other species did. Where most would hesitate, humans pushed forward. Where most would surrender, humans resisted until the end. The envoy finally spoke with a tone that mixed warning and respect. "Then know this, you have revealed yourselves. The moment you leapt through the stars, the galaxy felt it. Other eyes are now turning toward you. Some will come with curiosity, others with fire. You cannot hide anymore." The humans did not look away. The scientist answered, "Then let them come. Earth will meet them." For the first time in the history of the envoys, the leader felt something he could not control: uncertainty. These humans were unlike any species he had ever studied. They were reckless, fearless, and impossibly fast learners. To destroy them might invite chaos, but to ignore them might be even worse. After a long silence, the envoy leader ended the hologram transmission. Before the image vanished, he left them with one last message. "Your revelation has begun a new age. Whether that age is of greatness or destruction, only time will tell." The humans in the room stood quietly for a moment, letting his words sink in. Then the pilot broke the silence with a grin. "Well, at least they noticed us." Laughter filled the chamber, but beneath it was a powerful truth. Humanity was no longer in the shadows. They had revealed themselves to the galaxy, not as subjects but as challengers. And though danger loomed on the horizon, there was no turning back. Outside, the night sky glittered with stars. Each one was now a destination, a promise, and a challenge. For the first time, humanity did not look at the heavens with longing. They looked with determination. They knew the revelation had changed everything. And deep down, every human felt the same fire burning within them. The stars were no longer far away. They were within reach. The days after the revelation felt like the world had stepped into a dream. For the first time in history, humanity had not only looked at the stars but touched them, and the knowledge that alien eyes were watching made everything feel more urgent. Governments met in secret rooms, scientists worked around the clock, and ordinary people stood outside at night staring into the sky, whispering about what might come next. The warp test had shaken the planet, but what came after shook it even more. Cooperation. Nations that had once fought over borders, resources, and politics suddenly saw those things as small and meaningless. A far greater challenge had arrived. It wasn't about one country owning the stars, it was about Earth standing as one world, united under the threat and the promise of space. Scientists worked on improving the rebuilt warp engine. What had taken them weeks to piece together from alien fragments, they now refined with stunning speed. A second ship was prepared, larger and stronger, designed to carry not only one pilot but a full crew. Humanity was no longer satisfied with proving they could fly, they wanted to see how far they could go. At the same time, whispers spread across the galaxy. Other civilizations had indeed felt the ripple of Earth's first warp jump. Some dismissed it as impossible. Others laughed, calling humanity reckless children playing with dangerous fire. But a few, those who understood what kind of determination it took to achieve such a thing, watched with growing unease. For if humans could rebuild warp tech overnight, what else were they capable of? On Earth, preparations for the next great leap filled every laboratory and hangar. Engineers tested new alloys that could survive the strain of warp travel. Mathematicians rewrote equations that had once been theories, now turning them into working models. Pilots trained not only for flying but for surviving unknown worlds. It was a race not against each other, but against time. Everyone felt that the galaxy would not wait. Meanwhile, the alien envoy remained in orbit, silent but observant. They sent no threats, no attacks, only watched. For them, this was history unfolding. They had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, but never had one moved so quickly. Part of them wanted to stop it. Another part wanted to see how far humans would go. Then came the moment of truth. The second warp ship stood ready on the launch platform. This time, it wasn't hidden in secrecy. The whole world was watching. Cameras broadcasted the scene live, millions of eyes following every move. Children held their breath. Soldiers saluted. Old men and women, who had grown up believing the stars were unreachable, now cried quietly as they watched humanity prepare to step into the unknown. The crew, a team of 5, boarded the vessel. Their voices were steady, their faces calm, though inside their hearts pounded with excitement and fear. They weren't just explorers anymore, they were representatives of Earth, carrying with them the hopes of an entire planet. As the countdown began, silence fell across the world. At 0, the ship lifted, engines roaring like thunder. Then, with a flash brighter than lightning, the warp drive engaged. For one breathless moment, the ship vanished. The sky above Earth was empty. The world held its breath. Then, just as suddenly, the ship reappeared, shimmering into existence. But this time it wasn't the same. Data showed that the vessel had traveled not just a few kilometers, but across light years. They had reached a neighboring star system and returned in less than an hour. Humanity had done it again, this time not in secret, not in fear, but in triumph. Cheers erupted across every city. Strangers hugged in the streets, fireworks lit the skies, and the sound of celebration echoed from every corner of the world. Humanity was no longer bound to Earth. The beginning of a new era had arrived. But amid the joy, there was also a shadow. The envoy leader contacted Earth one last time. His golden eyes flickered with something almost like respect, though his words carried a heavy warning. You have taken your first true step into the stars. But remember, every step forward will be watched. You are no longer invisible. Powers greater than you will come, and they will test you. Some will want to destroy you. Others will want to use you. Be ready, humans, for your journey has only begun. The humans listened carefully, But their answer was clear. One of the crew members who had just returned spoke with confidence. "We know the risks. We know the dangers. But we also know this: we were never meant to stay on one planet forever. The stars are not yours to keep hidden. They belong to everyone who dares to reach for them. And we will reach them." The envoy gave a slow nod before the transmission ended. For the first time in their long history, they acknowledged humans not as children but as challengers. That night, as the celebrations continued, people looked at the stars in a new way. They were no longer distant, unreachable lights. They were paths, destinations, challenges waiting to be met. Children went to sleep dreaming of becoming explorers. Engineers sketched designs for faster ships. Leaders began to discuss building fleets, not just single vessels. The era of waiting was over. Humanity had taken its first steps, and there would be no going back. The galaxy might laugh or fear or rage, but humanity was ready to face it all. For the first time in history, Earth was not just a planet. It was the birthplace of a starfaring people. And as the sun rose the next morning, its light touched not just a world, but a future without limits. Humanity's new era had begun.